Emma Daniels was the picture of happiness, or so it appeared. At 29, she had everything she thought she had ever wanted. Married to Alexander Grant, one of the wealthiest men in the country, and living in a sprawling mansion with every luxury imaginable. Alexander was tall, handsome, and powerful, a man who commanded the room wherever he went. Their life together seemed like a fairy tale. Emma was sure she had found her happily ever after. The news of her pregnancy had only added to her joy. For months, she had dreamed of starting a family with Alexander, and now, finally, it was happening. As she stood in front of the mirror, cradling her growing belly, she imagined how thrilled he would be when she told him. She pictured the two of them holding their child together, their perfect family complete. But things had started to feel off in recent months. Alexander had become more distant, spending less time at home and more time at work. He claimed it was because his business ventures were growing, and he had to manage the expansion. Emma, ever the supportive wife, believed him, even though his long absences left her feeling increasingly lonely. It wasn't just the time apart that bothered her. He had become less affectionate, more withdrawn. His phone calls were brief, his responses curt. When he was home, he was distracted, always on his phone or rushing off to meetings. Emma tried to convince herself that it was just the stress of his career, but deep down, a sense of unease began to grow in her heart. She pushed the feelings aside, determined to focus on her pregnancy. She planned a special dinner for the night she would tell him about the baby. Emma spent the entire afternoon preparing his favorite meal, setting the table with candles and flowers. When he walked through the door, she smiled, hoping the announcement would bring them closer again. But instead of excitement, Alexander looked annoyed. He barely glanced at the table, muttered something about being tired, and retreated to his study without even sitting down to eat. Emma's heart sank. The evening she had been so excited about suddenly felt hollow. Later that night, as she lay in bed alone, waiting for Alexander to join her, Emma tried to reassure herself that everything would be fine. He would be happy about the baby. He had to be. Maybe it was just a rough patch in their marriage, and once they had their child, everything would fall into place. But the nagging feeling that something was wrong wouldn't go away. The next few weeks only confirmed Emma's worst fears. Alexander's behavior grew even more erratic. He would leave for days at a time without explanation, always citing business trips, but his stories didn't add up. She began to notice discrepancies, calls from numbers she didn't recognize, vague explanations that seemed rehearsed, and a distance in his eyes whenever they were together. One night, after Alexander told her he was leaving for another business trip, Emma decided to trust her instincts. She had never been one to doubt him before, but the situation had changed. Something was off, and she couldn't ignore it any longer. Emma followed Alexander that evening, keeping her distance as he drove through the city. Her heart pounded in her chest, a mix of fear and dread swirling inside her. What was she even expecting to find? Maybe she was overreacting, letting her pregnancy hormones get the best of her. But when Alexander pulled into a gated townhouse in a well-off suburb, her blood ran cold. She watched as he parked the car and was greeted by a woman at the door, a woman who was clearly familiar with him. She was tall, elegant, and smiled warmly as she embraced Alexander. And then, a little boy ran out of the house, arms wide, calling him Daddy. Emma sat frozen in her car, staring in disbelief. Alexander had another family. He wasn't just lying about his whereabouts. He had been living a double life. Her hands shook as she gripped the steering wheel, trying to process the horror of what she was seeing. Everything she thought she knew about her husband was a lie. She drove home in a daze, barely able to comprehend what had just happened. The man she loved, the man she was carrying a child with, had been deceiving her from the very beginning. Every moment they had shared, every plan they had made, had been built on a foundation of lies. By the time she reached home, Emma felt numb. Her perfect life had shattered in an instant. How could he do this to her? How could he betray her like this, especially when she was pregnant with his child? She sat in the darkened living room for hours, trying to gather the courage to confront him. But when Alexander finally returned, his demeanor was as casual as ever, as though nothing had changed. The confrontation was inevitable. Emma could barely hold herself together when Alexander walked through the door the next evening, acting as if everything were normal. She had spent the day replaying the scene outside the townhouse in her mind, her emotions swinging wildly between anger, disbelief, and crushing sadness. Without waiting for pleasantries, Emma stood in front of him, her voice trembling as she spoke. "Who are they, Alexander?" she asked, her eyes burning with unshed tears. "The woman, the child, your other family." For a moment, Alexander froze, and in that instant, Emma saw the truth in his eyes. He wasn't surprised that she knew. He had expected it. Instead of panic or guilt, his expression was one of resignation. "Emma, it's not what you think." "Not what I think?" She cut him off, her voice rising with anger. "I saw you with them. I saw the way you looked at them. You've been lying to me for years." Alexander ran a hand through his hair, a sigh escaping his lips. "It's complicated, Emma. My life. It's not as simple as you think." Emma's heart broke at his indifference. There was no apology, no attempt to make things right. His words were cold, calculated, as though he were discussing a business deal gone wrong rather than the destruction of their marriage. "You're carrying my child," he said, his tone emotionless. "I'll make sure you're taken care of. Financially, you won't have to worry about anything." Emma felt like she had been punched in the gut. "Taken care of? You think I care about your money? I wanted a family, Alexander. I wanted love, not this sham of a life you've been living." He shook his head, as if frustrated by her emotional response. "I never wanted you to find out like this. But the truth is, my marriage with Catherine, it's more of a business arrangement. There's no love there." "Then why didn't you tell me? Why lie to me all these years?" "I couldn't," he said simply. "You weren't supposed to know." Emma stood there, her world crumbling around her. She realized in that moment that the man she had loved, the man she had trusted with her heart, had never truly been hers. Everything had been a lie, and now she was left pregnant and alone, with nothing but shattered dreams. After that night, Emma left the mansion, packing her things and moving into a small apartment on the other side of the city. She couldn't bear to stay in the house filled with memories of a life that had never been real. The pain of betrayal was overwhelming, but she had no choice but to move forward. She was carrying Alexander's child, and she had to be strong for the baby growing inside her. Determined to uncover the full truth, Emma hired a private investigator to look into Alexander's secret life. The reports that came back only deepened her anger. Alexander hadn't just been leading a double life. His entire relationship with Catherine had been a facade. They were married in name only, bound by a contract of convenience to maintain their wealthy image. Catherine, it turned out, had been having an affair of her own with a prominent politician. Emma's heart ached for the life she had lost, but the more she learned about Alexander and Catherine's arrangement, the more she realized that their world was nothing like the love she had dreamed of. Their wealth, their power, it was all built on lies and manipulation. But as she sat with the damning information in front of her, Emma realized something important. She could use this knowledge to destroy them, to take revenge for the way she had been treated. But what would that accomplish? Would it heal the pain in her heart, or make her feel more hollow inside? She had a choice to make: seek revenge, or rise above the mess Alexander had created. Emma's decision to leave the opulent mansion in the shadow of Alexander's betrayal was one of the hardest things she'd ever done. She had walked away from the life she thought she wanted, but in her heart, she knew it was the only choice. The small apartment she moved into was a stark contrast to the luxury she had known. The furnishings were simple, the neighborhood unremarkable, but it was hers, her new beginning. Months passed, and Emma's pregnancy progressed. The loneliness was suffocating at times, but she remained strong for her unborn child. She refused to let Alexander's lies define her or the life she wanted for her baby. She threw herself into her work and her new routine, determined to rebuild her life one day at a time. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. One evening, A friend insisted that Emma come out for a charity gala at the city's most exclusive hotel. At first, Emma hesitated, reluctant to face the glitzy, polished world she had left behind. But her friend, concerned for her well-being, wouldn't take no for an answer. "You need to get out, Em," she said. "You deserve a night to feel good again. You can't let what happened trap you in sadness." Reluctantly, Emma agreed. She wore a simple but elegant dress that she had kept from her life with Alexander, her baby bump just starting to show. When she arrived at the event, she felt out of place, as though she were walking into a world she no longer belonged to. But she reminded herself that this was about moving forward, not dwelling on the past. The gala was buzzing with the city's elite, and as Emma mingled awkwardly among the crowd, she felt a pair of eyes watching her. Turning, she met the gaze of a man across the room, tall, with dark, tousled hair and an easy, confident smile. He was dressed in a well-tailored suit, but there was something different about him. Unlike the other men in the room, who wore their wealth like armor, he seemed at ease, as if he didn't need to prove anything to anyone. As the night went on, the man approached Emma, his smile warm and genuine. "You look like you could use a friend in this sea of strangers," he said, his voice smooth but unassuming. "Mind if I join you?" Emma, still cautious and guarded from everything she had been through, was hesitant. "Sure," she replied, offering a small smile in return. She wasn't ready to open up to anyone just yet, but there was something about him that made her feel a bit more comfortable. He introduced himself as Ethan Blackwood, a self-made entrepreneur who had built his wealth from the ground up. Unlike the billionaire circle she had been used to with Alexander, Ethan's success had come from hard work and perseverance, not from family legacy or shady deals. As they talked, Emma found herself relaxing for the first time in months. Ethan was charming, but not in the arrogant, showy way she had grown accustomed to. He was sincere, and his eyes held a kindness that she hadn't seen in a long time. They talked for hours about everything from business to books to life, and for the first time since her world had collapsed, Emma felt a flicker of hope. Emma's life slowly began to brighten with Ethan's presence. They started spending more time together, first as friends, but there was an undeniable connection between them. Ethan wasn't pushy or demanding. He gave Emma the space she needed, understanding that she had been deeply hurt. He never pried into her past, but was always there to listen when she was ready to talk. Eventually, Emma confided in Ethan about Alexander, the betrayal, and the baby she was carrying. She told him about the secret family and the emotional scars she was trying to heal. Ethan listened quietly, his expression thoughtful but not judgmental. "Emma, you've been through hell," Ethan said softly, after hearing her story. "But you're strong, stronger than you realize, and you don't have to go through this alone." His words were a balm to her wounded heart. Emma had been fighting so hard to be strong, to do everything on her own, but for the first time, she felt like she didn't have to. Ethan's quiet support and unwavering kindness gave her the strength to keep moving forward. But the storm of Alexander's deceit wasn't over yet. One afternoon, Emma received a call from her private investigator, and the news was far worse than she had anticipated. Alexander's web of lies was far more tangled than she had ever imagined. Not only had he kept his other family hidden from her, but he had been using his wealth and connections to manipulate everyone around him. The investigators had uncovered shady business deals, illicit transactions, and a tangled web of corruption that involved not just Alexander, but his entire family. And Catherine, Alexander's wife, wasn't as innocent as she seemed. She had known about Emma all along, playing along with Alexander's charade for the sake of maintaining her social status. What's more, Catherine had been involved in her own secret affair with a high-profile politician, one that was beginning to unravel and threaten her own carefully constructed life. Emma was shaken to her core. She had always known that Alexander was ruthless in business, but she hadn't realized how deep his deceptions ran. The whole world they had built together was a house of cards, and it was all coming down. She had enough evidence now to expose Alexander for who he truly was, to bring his empire crashing down. But as she stood there, holding the investigator's report in her hands, Emma felt a deep weariness settle over her. Revenge had seemed like the answer at first, but now it felt hollow. What would it achieve? Would it bring her peace? Would it heal the pain she had endured? As if sensing her turmoil, Ethan arrived at her apartment that evening. He could see the weight of her discovery in her eyes, and without asking questions, he simply held her. Emma leaned into him, feeling the warmth and comfort of his embrace. "You don't have to do this alone," Ethan whispered. "You've been through enough, Emma. You deserve to be happy." And in that moment, Emma realized that Ethan was right. She didn't need revenge. She didn't need to destroy Alexander to find peace. She needed to move forward, to build a life of her own, free from the lies and betrayals of the past. Emma's decision to walk away from revenge was difficult, but it was the right one. She had the power to destroy Alexander, to ruin him the way he had ruined her. But in the end, she chose not to. She chose to rise above the darkness that had consumed her life for so long. With Ethan by her side, Emma took the high road. Instead of launching a public scandal or dragging Alexander's name through the mud, she quietly moved forward with her life. She consulted a lawyer to ensure that she and her baby were financially secure, but she refused to get caught up in the drama of Alexander's crumbling empire. Meanwhile, Alexander's world was falling apart. His secret life was beginning to unravel, and the media was starting to catch on. Catherine's affair became public knowledge, and Alexander's shady business deals were under investigation. The empire he had built on lies and manipulation was starting to crumble. But Emma no longer cared. She had let go of the bitterness and the anger, choosing instead to focus on the future. Her life was no longer tied to Alexander's lies. She was free. As her pregnancy progressed, Ethan remained a constant source of support. He accompanied her to doctor's appointments, helped her set up the nursery, and was by her side through every step of the journey. Their relationship deepened, evolving from friendship into something much more. Ethan wasn't just there for her. He embraced her child as his own, offering a love and stability that Emma had never experienced before. He wasn't perfect, but he was real, and that was all Emma needed. By the time Emma gave birth to a beautiful baby girl, her life had transformed completely. The pain of Alexander's betrayal was still there, but it no longer defined her. She had built a new life, one filled with love, trust, and hope for the future. Ethan was there in the delivery room, holding her hand as she brought their daughter into the world. The moment their baby cried for the first time, Emma felt a rush of love that washed away the remaining shadows of her past. She had survived the storm, and now she was stepping into a new chapter, one filled with the love and peace she had always wanted. Alexander tried to re-enter Emma's life after the birth of their child, but she made it clear that his lies had no place in her world anymore. He could be a part of his daughter's life, but only on her terms. She refused to let him or his toxic world poison the life she had worked so hard to rebuild. As Emma held her newborn daughter in her arms, with Ethan by her side, she knew she had made the right choice. She had chosen love over revenge, hope over despair, and in the end, she had found the happiness that had once seemed so far out of reach. The past was behind her, and her future was bright. The weeks after her daughter's birth were a blur of sleepless nights, tender moments, and quiet joy. Emma had settled into her new life as a mother, finding solace in the simple moments, watching her baby sleep, feeling her small fingers wrap around her own, and knowing that every day was a new beginning. Ethan was there through it all, his love for both Emma and her daughter growing stronger by the day. However, as much as Emma wanted to leave the past behind, there were still unresolved matters with Alexander. He had kept his distance initially, respecting her wishes, but the time had come for a formal discussion about his role in their daughter's life. Emma knew that Alexander had every right to be a father, but she was determined to set clear boundaries. One afternoon, she agreed to meet him at a lawyer's office where they could talk in a controlled, neutral environment. As Emma walked into the room, holding her baby close, she felt a wave of anxiety. She hadn't seen Alexander since the birth, and though she was ready to face him, the emotional weight of their shared history still hung over her. Alexander stood as she entered, his eyes immediately drawn to the baby in her arms. For a brief moment, Emma saw something in his expression: regret, perhaps, or the recognition of what he had lost. But it passed quickly, replaced by the cool, composed demeanor she had come to expect from him. They sat across from each other at the table, with their respective lawyers at their sides. The meeting was professional and straightforward. Alexander expressed his desire to be involved in their daughter's life, and though Emma had her reservations, she knew it was the right thing to do. "I want her to know me," Alexander said, his voice measured. "I want to be a part of her life, even if things didn't work out between us." Emma met his gaze, her own voice calm but firm. "She deserves a father who loves her. But that doesn't mean you get to be in control anymore, Alexander. We'll make sure you have visitation rights, but I won't allow your lies and manipulation to affect her." Alexander didn't argue. He seemed resigned, almost as if he had already accepted that Emma's heart would never be his again. The legal agreement was drafted, giving Alexander regular visits, but Emma would maintain full custody. It was the best outcome she could hope for. As the meeting ended and Alexander left the room, Emma felt a sense of closure. There was no lingering bitterness, no desire for revenge. She had faced him, asserted her boundaries, and moved forward. For the first time, she felt free from the shadow of their past. Months passed, and with each passing day, Emma's life became more beautiful. Her daughter, Lily, grew stronger and more vibrant, her laughter filling their home with joy. Ethan had seamlessly stepped into the role of father, loving Lily as if she were his own flesh and blood. The bond between Ethan, Emma, and their daughter was undeniable, a family built on love, trust, and mutual respect. Despite the challenges of motherhood, Emma found happiness in the life she had rebuilt. She and Ethan were no longer just friends, but partners in every sense of the word. They shared the responsibilities of raising Lily, supporting each other through sleepless nights and hectic days. Ethan's steady presence was a constant reminder that love could be kind, selfless, and healing. One evening, as they sat together in the quiet of their home, watching Lily sleep in her crib, Ethan turned to Emma, his eyes soft with emotion. "I know we've been through a lot," he began, his voice low, "but I've never felt more certain about anything in my life. I love you, Emma. I love Lily. I want us to be a family, officially." Emma's heart swelled at his words. She had known this moment would come, but hearing him say it made her realize just how far she had come. From the broken woman who had discovered Alexander's betrayal to the strong, resilient mother who had found love again. Tears welled in her eyes as she smiled. "I love you too, Ethan. I don't know what I would have done without you." Ethan took her hand, his grip gentle but reassuring. "You would have survived, Emma. You're the strongest person I know, but I'm so glad I could be here with you." With that, Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. He opened it to reveal a simple but elegant ring, the kind that symbolized not wealth or status, but love and commitment. "Will you marry me?" Ethan asked, his voice steady, though his eyes held a hint of nervousness. Emma didn't hesitate. She nodded, her heart full of joy and certainty. "Yes, of course I will." They embraced, their future stretching out before them, full of promise and hope. In Ethan's arms, Emma knew she had found what she had been searching for all along. Not just love, but a partner who cherished her, a man who was willing to build a life with her based on honesty and trust. Their wedding was a small, intimate affair, attended by close friends and family. There were no grand gestures or elaborate displays, just the quiet, profound love that had grown between them. As they exchanged vows, Emma looked into Ethan's eyes and knew that this was her true happily ever after. In the months that followed, their family continued to thrive. Alexander kept his promise to be part of Lily's life, visiting her regularly but respecting the boundaries Emma had set. There were no more secrets, no more lies. Emma had built a life that was hers, a life free from the shadows of the past. She had found love again, not in the wealth or power that had once seemed so important, but in the simple, enduring strength of a man who loved her for who she was. And in that love, she found healing, redemption, and the promise of a brighter future. As Emma stood on the porch of their home one evening, watching the sunset with Lily in her arms and Ethan by her side, she knew that she had finally found peace. She had survived the storm, and now she was ready for whatever the future would bring. Her journey had been long and painful, but it had led her here, to a life filled with love, joy, and the kind of happiness she had always dreamed of. And this time, it was real. Thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed the story. Please don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe for more delightful stories.